Hey everybody, Sean from Media Assault here, and I wanted to do another review of a Hammer horror classic. This time out it is The Mummy from 1959, and this is the third of three films that basically started the Hammer horror tradition. The first was The Curse of Frankenstein, which I reviewed back in March. The second is The Horror of Dracula, which I have yet to review. I've actually not seen that in quite some time, although I do own it and will be reviewing it at some point. But this is the third one. It's The Mummy. And as is the case with those other two films, this stars Peter Cushing and Christopher Lee and is directed by Terence Fisher. And this is just a really cool film. And if you're a fan of mummy movies, you probably realize there's only so many different ways to tell what is essentially the same story, which is at some point somebody from present day awakens what is thought to be a dead person who has been mummified by the Egyptians. And of course, you know, all the ancient lore that goes around the whole tradition of that. This is, of course, no different. In fact, the story for the Hammer version of The Mummy is pretty much lifted from the old Universal series. Not the original Mummy, not the original version starring Boris Karloff, but a later film called The Mummy's Curse, or The Mummy's Tomb, I believe, with some elements taken from a movie called The Mummy's Hand, I believe. I haven't seen those films in quite a while, but while I was reading up on this, looking at the descriptions of the plots for those earlier Universal films, it almost reads exactly like this particular film. One thing that is apparent, or not so much apparent, but I also read about this particular film, is that this one was actually made with the approval of Universal to use some of the character names, including Karis, which is the name of the mummy, the Christopher Lee character. And that is absolutely taken from the earlier Universal films. The plot, such as it is, I will basically touch on it. Peter Cushing's character is named John Banning, and he and his father and John's uncle come across the tomb of Princess Annika in 1895. And John actually injures his leg and is not able to be there when the actual discovery is made, but his father and his uncle go in, and his father actually comes across something that causes him to go insane. And that's not shown on camera, and Uncle Joe is actually not there when it happens, so he's not sure what happened to him either. We flash forward by 3 years, and John's father comes out of this sort of hysterical insanity and is suddenly clear as a bell, and he warns John that something bad is going to happen because the guardian of the tomb is going to come after those that have desecrated it. And I'll leave it at that. Of course, what's going to happen is the mummy is, of course, going to attack and kill people, and the quote-unquote present day, 1898, Britons have to figure out how to stop them. Christopher Lee plays the mummy, or Karis, and one thing that's very cool about his performance is because of the nature of his makeup, and I don't know if you can see, let that focus in, you can see the makeup a little bit there. Because of the nature of the makeup, he and the nature of the character, who has his tongue removed and can't speak, he's forced basically to be silent for all the times when he's on screen as the mummy. So all of his acting has to come from two things: his eyes and the way he carries his body, his posture. And he does an absolutely phenomenal job of letting you know what he's thinking and feeling. Yes, the mummy thinks and feels. And the directing and the cinematography are done in such a way to amplify his height. And I'm not sure how tall Christopher Lee is in real life, but by the way he's shot and framed in this film, you would think he is, as one character describes him, 10 feet tall. He looks absolutely huge. Another cool thing about Christopher Lee's portrayal as the mummy is, unlike the old Universal horror versions where he was sort of a slow, shambling, shuffling creature who somehow managed to catch up to people. This mummy is powerful, he's strong, he busts through doors, he bends steel beams, he smashes through windows. He's just incredibly powerful. So with that emphasis on his height and the fact that you can tell what he's thinking and feeling, he's just an incredibly creepy character, and very well done by Christopher Lee. Peter Cushing is good in his role. He's sort of subdued. He's not anywhere near as maniacal as he was in Curse of Frankenstein. He's a little bit more understanding, a little more thoughtful. He's trying to unravel the mystery of, you know, who's killing these people who were involved in his expedition 3 years ago, and kind of has to come to terms with the fact that indeed there may be a mummy killing the people that he knows. And there's a particularly great scene with Peter Cushing and George Pastel, I believe is how you pronounce his name, who plays what is essentially the villain in this film, who goes by the name of Muhammad Bey, I believe. But he's supposed to be the villain, but this particular scene that he has with Peter Cushing, they basically debate whether archaeology archaeology in general is basically glorified tomb or grave robbing, I guess. And it's a very cool scene with the back and forth, and it kind of gives the villain, you get some insight into why he thinks the way he does and why he's defending defending the people that he's been sworn to protect, and why he feels so passionate about it. If there's anything that I would have to call a weakness in this film, well, first, it's not so much a weakness, but it is something that I did notice when compared to Curse of Frankenstein. The direction in this film and sort of the emphasis, Terence Fisher in Curse of Frankenstein, it was very notable for the fact that it was more of a violent, more visually gory film than moviegoers had seen up to that point. It was a color horror film. The blood had to be red. The blood was very visual, or very visible rather, and you know, you had to see brains and stuff in jars and all that kind of stuff. In The Mummy, it's almost like they went completely in the opposite direction. The violence is more implied than anything else. You won't see, like in the scene where Christopher Lee has his tongue removed, you don't actually see it. You don't see any blood. You just sort of see his tongue with some tongs, and then they cut to a rear shot and you just see sort of a jerking motion, but you don't actually see anything. Everything is implied. And I don't think that's a bad thing. It's just something that I noticed that's very different between Curse of Frankenstein and The Mummy. And like I said, that's the first and third film in the Hammer horror trilogy that opened up the Hammer horror era. And I haven't seen the horror of Dracula in a long time, and I don't know off the top of my head how gory or lack thereof it is. So I can't compare to that one yet. I will review it, and I'll probably mention that when I do. Getting to weaknesses of this film, there are not many. One is the Egyptian sets, the tomb. It looks awfully cheap. Everything else looks really good. The makeup on The Mummy is great. The sets, the British mansions, if you will, that the characters live in look great. Very gothic looking, but the Egyptian tomb of Princess Annika looks like a cheap set. When they're actually opening the tomb doors, it's less than majestic. It looks like they're opening some sort of cabinet and they're preparing to walk into, you know, Narnia or something. And it's got sort of stereotypical Egyptian symbols painted on it. It looks like a plywood cabinet that they painted. That's what it looks like. And then when they get into the tomb, it's so brightly lit that if somebody was paying the electric bill for the thousands of years that it has been that way, I would probably suspect that bill would be rather high. I realize that it wouldn't be too exciting to have them walk into a pitch black tomb and not be able to see anything, but it's just that the lights are so varied. There's a very green light, green tint to everything, where it's obvious that it's not supposed to be natural light coming from somewhere. It's obviously artificial light, so it kind of breaks the mood a little bit and kind of has you notice very much that it's a very cheap looking set. But other than that, really, I can't think of anything that would really detract from the film. It's very obvious that this was made in the 50s. If you were going to compare this to the 1999 Brendan Fraser Mummy, there is a very noticeable absence of CGI in this film, and that's a good thing. I still like to admire the craft that went into creating the makeup for the mummy and the sets, except for the Egyptian set, and that type of thing. When it's done digitally, it just seems very sterile, and here, that's not a word I would use to describe this production at all. If I had to rate it, I would give this I would give this a very strong 8 out of 10. Just an absolute classic. The pacing is great. You got to see it if you love classic horror. So that's my review of The Mummy from Hammer Films in 1959. And by all means, go out and get it. You can obtain it very cheap. You can actually obtain it this way or as part of a box set called the Hammer Horror Collection, which you'll be seeing in the near future in my DVD Blu-ray update, because I actually picked that up earlier this month. So thanks again, everybody, for watching. As always, feel free to rate, comment, and subscribe, and take it easy. Thanks. Bye.